Me? Sure, I'm decent.
Rita Hayworth was a talented dancer and actress. She was one of the top stars and pinup girls during the 1940s. Rita is known as the love goddess, and her best known role is as Gilda. She was very sexy, bold, and glamorous, and it really showed on this film. Unfortunately, Rita would never get to outlive Gilda, and people would always expect her to be something she was not. Rita was born Margarita Carmen Cancino in Brooklyn, New York on October 17th in 1918. Her father, Eduardo, was Hispanic from a little town in Spain. His family consisted of famous dancers, and he wanted his daughter to follow in those footsteps. Eduardo's father owned a world-famous dancing school in Madrid, and he was Rita's first dance instructor. Her mother, Voga, was also a dancer. She was of Irish and English descent. Rita is the oldest of her two younger brothers who later went into the army. In March of 1974, they both passed away within a week of each other. Throughout Rita's childhood, she was pretty lonely. Her dad was strict and kind of possessive over her. He didn't let her have much freedom. She was very shy and did not have many friends, and while her brothers would play with the neighbors, she would stay on the porch and wait for her dance lessons to start. As soon as Rita was able to walk, her father made sure she started dancing lessons and attended dance classes every day for a few years. She said, quote, "Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse was part of my girlhood," end quote. She didn't really like all the rehearsing much, but she was scared to tell her father how she felt, so she just did exactly what he wanted her to do. When she was 9 years old, her dad moved the family to Hollywood. He believed that they would be able to dance in movies. Eduardo and his sister was a dancing act until Rita replaced her at age 13. They were called the Dancing Cancinos. Her dad wanted her to appear more mature and Latino, so Rita's hair was dyed from brown to black. They would perform in Tijuana, Mexico because of California's labor laws against underage children. This was a popular spot in those days for people from California to visit. People wondered if the dance duo were actually married. It was said that her dad, Eduardo, never denied the allegations, and later Rita revealed to her second husband, Orson Welles, that her dad was actually sexually abusing her during that time. Her mother, Voga, would sleep in the bed with her in order to protect her from the abuse. The only thing about this is that Orson Welles was the only one who was told this story. No one else, not her friends or family, confirmed this allegation. No one really knows if this is true or not. Rita never did get to graduate from high school. She became the breadwinner for her family instead. She would perform 4 shows a day, 2 in the morning and 2 at night, and her dad would drink and gamble away all of their earnings. Rita came alive on stage. She was bold, graceful, and very entertaining to watch, and this caught Edward Judson's attention. He was a car salesman, but luckily he had connections in the film industry. They later got married, and her parents were furious about their relationship because she was only 18 and he was 40. This put a lot of friction between Rita and her parents. Edward Judson did have an influence on her career advancement. He helped her land her first contract with Fox. It was during her time there that her name would be changed from Margarita Cancino to Rita Cancino. This would be the first of the 2 name changes throughout her career. Edward Judson really believed in her, even though her career didn't look promising at first. He knew she had potential. He was over the money Rita made and reinvested it into promotions and publicity for her. It eventually paid off, and she was able to get a life-changing contract with Columbia Pictures. Rita eventually became unhappy with her husband. She noticed that he viewed her as just another investment. She made the complaint that he was very cruel to her. He stalked her and even threatened to throw acid in her face if she ever left him. She ended up promising to pay him $12,000 because of these threats and other threats he made. Edward Judson had damaging and scandalous information about Rita that could possibly damage her career, so Harry Kahn, the head at Columbia Pictures, stepped in and actually paid Judson a big amount to keep quiet and stay out of her life for good. They divorced in 1942 and they were married for 5 years. Harry Kahn was another man who mistreated Rita. He had a lot of control over her life. The only good thing he did for her is paid her ex-husband to leave her alone and managed to make good casting decisions throughout her career. He was one of those men who wanted you to use what you have to get what you want, and he expected Rita to not only sleep with him, but other executives to get roles. Rita denied all his sexual advances. From then on, he never respected her. He would stalk her, bug her dressing room, and meddled in her personal life. Rita would later say that he was a monster and believed he owned her. He was very possessive of me as a person, and he didn't want me to go out with anybody or have any friends. When she was first signed to him, he believed she looked too Mediterranean. He also believed her last name sounded too Spanish. He wanted her to be viewed as the all-American girl next door. So Rita Cancino began to use her mother's maiden name, Hayworth, which was Irish. Rita was also encouraged to change her hair color to dark red and had electrolysis done to raise her hairline to broaden the appearance of her forehead. Her and Harry Khan never got along and would continue to bump heads the whole time she worked at Columbia. In 1942, while filming My Gal Sal, she started a new relationship with her co-star Victor Mature. They quickly became engaged before he left to go into service, but she soon forgot about Victor when Orson Welles started writing her love letters. He knew he wanted to marry her after he saw her famous pinup girl picture floating around. This photo made Hayworth one of the top 2 pinup girls during World War II, and it was the most requested pinup photograph for a few years. In 2002, the satin nightgown that she wore in this photo sold for over $26,000. Orson Welles fell in love with her after seeing it, and she was not interested in him at first, but his charm eventually grew on her. They got married in 1943 while filming a show they were doing together, and they kept this a secret and no one knew about it until the day before their wedding. A few hours after they got married, they returned back to work on set. A little over a year later, they had their daughter Rebecca. Everything was going good. Rita loved him and he loved her. And of course, Harry Khan was furious about her getting married and pregnant. He did make statements about it because she was doing so well in her career. She was established as a top star of the 1940s, and for 3 consecutive years, she was named one of the top movie box office attractions in the world. Having a baby did not slow her career down like he thought it would, but it did have an effect on her marriage. Eventually, her marriage with Orson Welles was not going as planned. She said that Orson did not want to be tied down. He wasn't really hands-on with their daughter either. She recalls he was always gone for work. He didn't have any interest in settling down and building a life together. He told her he didn't want the responsibility when it was time to purchase their home, and he never should have married her in the first place. He believed it interfered with his freedom and his way of life. He was also unfaithful to her, and on November 10th of 1947, she was granted a divorce that became final the following year. She sued Orson Welles for back payment of child support, but she claimed that he never paid it. It was during this marriage that Rita began to drink heavily. They were married for 4 years. Her next marriage would be to Prince Ali Khan, another marriage that would soon come to an end. In 1948, Rita was introduced to the wealthy Prince Ali Khan while on vacation. They began a year-long relationship and were married the next year. She is the first Hollywood actress who became a princess. Rita was at the height of her career, but she was in love, so she broke her contract with Columbia and sailed for France. She left Hollywood and did not think twice about it. She was ready for a new start. Later on during that year, Rita gave birth to their daughter, Princess Yasmin. Everything was going good. She was happy and nervous at the same time about starting a new life away from Hollywood. But she quickly realized that Ali Khan's lifestyle was totally different from hers. He was the life of the party, and she wanted a quiet life. Eventually, it became too much for her. She struggled to fit in with his friends and found it difficult to learn French. And he was a Muslim and she was a Catholic, and it just didn't work. Ali Khan was also known as a playboy, and it was suspected that he had been unfaithful to Rita during their marriage. She would move to Nevada to speed up the process of her divorce, and she stayed with her daughters, saying that there was a threat that Princess Yasmin would be kidnapped. The divorce was final in 1953 on the grounds of extreme cruelty. She had failed to gain child support from him, just like Orson Welles. She didn't want to return back to Hollywood, but this forced her to return to doing films. Prince Ali Khan wanted his daughter to be raised Muslim, so he offered Rita $1 million to make it happen, but Rita refused. And when Princess Yasmin was 10 years old, Prince Ali Khan passed away from a car crash. After the divorce, she married the same year. She married actor and singer Dick Haymes. He was the worst husband for her. He was verbally and physically abusive, but she said she married him in order for him to gain citizenship. Haynes was from Argentina, and not long before he met Rita, he was about to be deported back to Argentina. She assumed full responsibility for his citizenship, and it was during this process that they started really to like each other, and this led to them getting married in 1953. His singing career was diminishing. The only time he got a big crowd was when it was promoted that Rita would be at his shows. From the start of their marriage, he had money issues with the IRS, and two of his former wives were taking legal action against him for unpaid child support. His financial problems were so bad that he could not return to California without being arrested. Rita ended up paying most of his debts. During their marriage, she was involved in so much negative publicity that it lessened her appeal, and no one really wanted to work with her because of it. She ended up staying off the big screen for years. Rita had enough when Haymes struck her in the face in a public nightclub in Los Angeles. The assault really shook her, and after that she was done. She packed her bags, walked out, and never returned, and they divorced in 1955. Rita stayed single for a few years after that, but she fell in love again with her final husband, film producer James Hill. They got married on February 2nd, 1958. He put her in one of her last major films called Separate Tables. The marriage would come to an end after 3 years. Rita felt used by Hill. He wanted her to continue making movies, while she wanted them both to retire from Hollywood and live a quiet and peaceful life. Hill and Rita would be heard arguing by others, especially when they were drinking. That's when the arguments got really out of control. Rita made accusations that her husband actually hit her all the time. Their relationship was described as a marital massacre after their celebrity friend and his wife joined the couple for dinner at a restaurant in Spain. He recalls that the occasion turned into the most embarrassing evening of his life after witnessing one of their arguments. Hill and Rita later divorced in 1961. She never married again, and her last known affair is with actor Glenn Ford. Their love affair began in 1945 during the filming of Gilda. This would go on to be a long-term, off and on, 40-year affair. This would be the longest account of relations Rita had with any other man. Glenn said you couldn't help but to fall in love with Rita, and they were very fond of each other. Her and Glenn would be paired together in a total of 6 films. They connected really well as co-stars. While filming The Love of Carmen in 1948, Rita was pregnant by Glenn, but she traveled to France to get an abortion. In 1960, Glenn built his house right next door to hers. He installed a gate in his backyard so she can come over to his house anytime. Glenn's son recalls that she was always over and they were constantly together. Rita complimented Glenn, calling him the best neighbor a woman ever had. They continued the relationship for many years into the early 1980s. He was also one of Rita's pallbearers when she died. I don't know why they never got married, but it could be because they both were always married to someone else, or maybe they just really enjoyed each other as lover and friends. Sadly, Rita's mental health began to decline, and she was no longer able to control herself. But before that happened, she did star in a string of successful pictures until the early 1970s. Her last film was in The Wrath of God in 1972 at age 54. At this point, she was ready to retire from acting, but she agreed to do this film. The experience exposed her poor health and her worsening mental state. She could not remember her lines, and her scenes had to be shot one line at a time. Later that year, she agreed to just do one more movie, the British film Tales That Witness Madness. But because of her worsening health, she left the set and never returned to acting again. She was upset about not remembering her lines. Her sister-in-law said that she would call her dad Eduardo every day, and she would be on the phone crying, telling him that she could not remember her lines. He told her that it was okay and she had a great career and not to apologize to anyone. At 62, she was diagnosed with early onset dementia. The alcohol covered up its symptoms. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin, said that her mom would have these out-of-the-blue outbursts She would fly into a rage, and her family thought it was just from the alcoholism and was relieved when they found out what was really going on. She could no longer control her professionalism, and she became unpredictable. Her health had deteriorated so bad that she could no longer take care of herself. She then was placed under the care of her daughter, Princess Yasmin, and when asked how her mother was doing, she would tell people that she was still beautiful, but she's a shell. Rita lapsed into a semi-coma in February of 1987, and on May 14, she passed away at the age of 68 from complications associated with Alzheimer's disease. She was at her home in Manhattan, the one that she shared with her daughter, Princess Yasmin. As the love goddess, Rita never did find a lover who loved Rita and not the image she portrayed on the screen. In my opinion, it did seem like Rita did enjoy her time with Glenn Ford, and he enjoyed her as well. Rita was loving, shy, and very caring, and it's said that she lived the last few of her years confused and not remembering even the simplest things.
For 7 days they shovel snow so you can put the blame on me, boy.
Thank you all so much for watching. Like this video if you enjoyed it and comment your thoughts below on this glamorous queen.